One. Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Rowan Drewitt. Hi, Kevin. We're going to
Hi,
discuss
Debbie.
planets.
Mm.
It's Wednesday today, which is each planet is aligned to each day, and today would be Mercury. So we thought this would be a good day to chat, and then we just lost the internet. So we're hoping this works. So thanks for coming, Kevin. Let's talk about the planets. Where would you like to start?
Sure. Well, shall we start with the heart of the solar system, the sun? In astrology, the sun and moon are regarded as planets, even though we know one's a star and one's a moon. But to the ancients, they were called the lights or the luminaries. And the sun, of course, is at the heart of the solar system, which is very appropriate because in astrology, the sun actually rules the heart. Because the heart is what keeps, without the sun, none of us would be alive. And without your heart, none of us are alive. So the two have a sort of a nice sort of meeting together. It gels quite nicely. In astrology, the sun rules the sign of Leo. It's the only sign it rules. It doesn't rule any other. And the sun is regarded. I mean, everybody knows their sun sign columns that they read in the newspapers. And to astrologers that use all 10 planets in their work, it's very frustrating. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, is the sun sign columns, because on the positive side, it's getting astrology into the public domain, and it's there in the newspapers, it's online and all that. So you can read your sun sign column, but also it puts people off. The downside of it is they think that's all there is to astrology. And they will think, well, how can a 12th of the population of the world all have the same thing happen to them on the same day? It's impossible. It's a load of rubbish. And sun sign astrology tends to sideline it. But the positive side is that, it keeps astrology in the public view. There is one astrologer I know who, when he's doing a talk, he always puts himself as unrepentant sun sign astrologer. Because
unrepentant sun sign astrologer. That's funny.
Yeah, I've met him a few times. He lives down in Somerset way, but he's actually got the original book written by the first person who wrote sun sign columns for the Daily Telegraph in about 1933, something like that. But before then, that's when sun sign astrology started. Less than 100 years ago. But before then, astrology had been going for thousands of years and was never about sun sign stuff. Sun sign astrology is like almost the newest thing in astrology in terms of, if you look upon it, the 5,000 odd years it's been going, whatever. But anyway, so the sun, but it is appropriate. My astrology teacher always said it's very funny. Despite everything you have in your chart, the sun sign always shines through. There'll always be something at the heart of you that makes you an Aquarian, a Gemini, a Taurus, or Capricorn, or whatever, And we do tend to, as astrologers, we think, oh yeah, well they would do that. They're a Taurus, or they would do that. They're a Scorpio, whatever. But there is all the other overlay of the other 9 planets, which we'll come on to. But so sun sign astrology works on the fact that the sun is regarded in astrology as the very heart of you, the very what you are on your inner core, if you like. It's when you boil it all down, that is what you are eventually. But of course, a Leo ruled by the sun with a different moon and a different ascendant, a different rising sign, all that are going to be very different to another Leo with a different moon sign and a different ascendant and all the other planets and house placements and all the rest of it. But they will still be acting in a Leo way in whatever part of their life that sun is placed in their chart. So
those traits would still come through.
They do
in different ways for each different.
Yeah, you might have to strip a lot away, like an onion. You might have to peel away the layers, but when you get to the heart of that onion, they're still a Leo. They're still ruled by that sun. One of the techniques that we use in astrology, particularly to do with the sun, is a thing called the solar return. Right now, so have you heard of this? Have you?
I have, but let's explain it.
Right. Well, obviously everybody knows that on your birthday you get wished many happy returns, right? But what is returning? What's happened is the sun has returned to the place it was at the time that you were born. So actually, when you wish somebody many happy returns, you're actually talking in astrological language, even though you might not know it. Just like when people are blowing out a candle on their birthday cake, they're performing candle magic, make a wish and blow out the candle, but they don't know that they're performing magic. But anyway, the solar return. At the time you were born, the sun is in degrees, minutes, and seconds, exactly at a certain point in the zodiac, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is almost unique because you're very unlikely to get two babies born in the same place at the same time at the same second of time. You know, they might, if they're born a minute later, in astrology that has a difference, makes a difference. But when the sun returns to that very degrees, minutes, and seconds of arc that you're born, that is a precise moment to a second of time. And if you know your time exactly, you can work out when the sun does return to that point, and then you can draw up a chart for that moment, and that is your year ahead. That will show the areas of your life that are going to be in a focus for you in the year to come, right? If you haven't got a time of birth, you can't draw up a solar return chart. There's no other way of doing it. You've got to know the exact time. And it can occur on the day before your birthday, on your birthday, or the day after. But more than likely, it will actually be on the day that you were born, depending on how close you were born to midnight, on the day that you were born. It can be the day before, it can be the day after.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because I was actually born at midnight. So obviously the sun's on the other side of the planet when I was born.
Yeah. Well, that would mean there's a much more chance that your solar return might happen the day before your birthday than on your birthday because of that proximity to midnight. And solar return charts is actually one of my specialities. That's not all astrologers use solar returns at all as the year ahead, but it's an area that I've used for nearly 30 years, and I always find it fascinating. And it's the thing that I'm apart from doing actual horoscopes, birth charts of when people were born, doing the year ahead, the solar return is the thing that I mostly get asked to do.
It's a nice thing to do for people for their birthdays. But if someone wanted their solar return done, they can't tell you on the day. You need a couple of weeks perhaps to put that together.
Oh yes. I mean, I'm not a professional consulting astrologer. Although I'm secretary of the Northern Lights Astrological Society and all that, it's always been. I'm not a professional astrologer. I'm someone that's had an interest in astrology for 30 years. I've done hundreds of charts and loads of solar returns. I've written articles. I actually did write a book about solar returns, but it never got published because the person I was writing it with didn't do the case studies that they were meant to do. I did all the technique about how to draw it up and all this.
There must be some way you can bring that book out though in some other way, because I think people.
I would hope so. It's sitting there on a floppy disk somewhere in my loft.
Floppy disk.
Floppy
disk. Get it on a USB stick.
Yeah, I do have an external floppy disk drive, so I could actually revive it. I was invited. There's a very famous American astrologer called Noel Till, right? Who was like the most famous astrologer in America. He died on New Year's Eve a couple of years ago. A very famous figure, 6'6", ex-opera singer and all this, and very larger than life, very much a sort of Russell Grant type character, And Noel had he still does, have a website. And on it, it has various different sections. And one of them was a forum. And I used to go on this every day and start talking about solar returns and stuff. And Noel Till didn't do solar returns. He used another method called solar arcs, which I won't go into now, but it's another method using the sun. Excuse me.
A solar
And
arc like a not
as
a
in
boat,
as you move,
shape.
all you do is you move. There's a technique in astrology called progressions, where you move the chart forward each year. And with solar arc, you move the chart forward 1 degree each year and all this. It's a very complicated thing, and not something that I actually used myself. But that was the thing that Noel favoured. So when he saw that I was doing all these postings on his forum about solar returns, he asked me to write an article for his website, which is still there. So
people can go to that. That's good.
they can just put in Till TYL Till Astrologer, and there's you get a menu come up, and on one of it's like articles, and I think it was 2006 I wrote it, something like that.
It'd still be relevant today, wouldn't it? Because
Oh yes,
astrology
it hasn't changed at all. It's called Solar Returns, Making Them Work, something like that. The article's called. But if you just look for Kathy and Kevin Rowan Drewitt as guest astrologers, there's one published every month. If you go on Noel Till's website, you'll be there for the rest of your life, because there's just tons and tons of stuff. So, but that's the most important thing, is the solar return chart. And in terms of how we use the sun in astrology, it's a very, very proven technique. And perhaps the most interesting thing about solar returns is you have to draw up the chart for where you are when the solar return occurs. So if you're like me, well, like most people, on their birthday, they might go away for the weekend. So I remember my solar return occurring a couple of years ago, and I was in Keswick in the Lake District. So I had to do the solar return for where I was in Keswick. So the interesting thing about this is you can draw the chart up in advance, and if you don't like it, you can be somewhere else when it occurs and alter how it happens. But do you know that story about the person that goes into the market and they see death coming to them, and then they ride out into the desert? You don't know that story?
No, go on. What's that story?
Okay, it's an old Arabic story. I mean, I'll be paraphrasing this because it's quite a long story. But this person goes into the marketplace in their town, and they see death. Obviously, the figure with the cowl and the scythe and all that, and they see them. And they're so terrified that they see death coming for them that they get on their horse and they ride out into the desert, into this remote place where death is actually waiting for them. And death says to him, "I actually came to tell you to come and meet me in the desert."
Excellent. Can't escape death.
It's like you can't get away from your fate. And from people that I've heard of 2 or 3 cases where people Russell Grant has done this, and Noel Till has done this, of drawing up the solar return, not liking it, and going somewhere else, only to end up with a worse chart than they would have had if they stayed where they were. So you can't mess with the hands of fate.
No, it's like if you try and mess with the stars, they just throw something even worse at you. Then
that's right. You know the expression, if you want to give the gods a laugh, make a plan.
Yes, I often hear the gods laughing when I'm making plans.
So yeah, that's pretty much what the sun is like in the chart. The sun, the moon, and the ascendant, the rising sign, which is the constellation. Well, not the constellation, the sign that's coming up over the eastern horizon at the time you were born. They're the 3 most important points in the chart.
So tell us a bit about the moon, because the moon is going to be full moon tomorrow. So I thought
it's a full moon tomorrow on the 28th of January, as we're recording this on the 27th, and I have seen the hazy moon outside tonight, because we've got a bit of fog here in Blackpool, which is where I'm based.
Yeah, it's too cloudy for me to see. I normally can see it, but it's cloudy.
Well, it's nice, the full moon. We all heard of lunatics, that gets a name. If you go into any town and ask a policeman what's the worst night of the month, they will tell you it's the full moon. It's when everybody goes crazy. It's
when the lunacy out, doesn't it?
The lunatic. That's right. The lunatics are taking over the asylum. Whatever. The moon in your chart, which is the equal to the sun in importance. So much so that at the Astrological Association of Great Britain, at their conference, for every speaker, they tell you they put their name, and then they tell you their sun sign, their moon sign, and their ascendant, because these are considered the three most basic things, characteristics of your personality. Now, the moon in the chart, much as the sun is regarded in astrology as a masculine planet, right? Whereas the moon, because it's receptive, and I'm trying not to be sexist here or anything, but the moon has long been regarded by cultures for thousands of years as a goddess, whereas the sun is a god. You've got the sun god Ra, for example, or Sol. With the moon, you've got Diana, Selene, and Celeste, and all these other goddesses. So the moon is always regarded as feminine. And the moon in astrology is regarded to be to do with your emotions, right? And it, again, like the sun, it only rules one sign. It rules the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of motherhood. It rules the womb and the breasts. So the moon is regarded very much as a feminine thing, the feminine principle, and it's about your feelings and your emotions. So I have to stress it's not about love. We'll get to love when we get on to Venus. But no, the moon is very much about your emotions. So if you've got your moon, you know, there's 4 different elements in astrology. There's fire, earth, air, and water. The moon is a water sign. The moon rules the sign of Cancer, which is a water sign, and of course the moon, as we know, moves the tides in the sea. So there's that correlation there. And of course we are something like 70% water. So this is why the moon affects us, because the moon affects the water on the earth with its pull, the gravitational pull. It affects us in the same way. So whichever 12 signs of the zodiac your moon is in when you're born, that has a bearing on how you see the world emotionally and how you react emotionally. So if you have moon in Cancer, that's going to be the strongest placement, because the moon rules the sign of Cancer. And that means that you're going to be very much maternal. Even if you're a man, you're very family orientated and very much about your ancestors and the past. And you're going to be a very emotional person. Cancers are very prone to showing their emotions and crying and things, or being emotive and compassionate and that sort of thing. Whereas if it's in a colder sign, you know, an air sign like Gemini or Aquarius, these people tend to their feelings, they're much more colder, if you like, not unfeeling, but it just means they don't get emotional over things. And while some people might think that's a bad thing, you don't want a surgeon doing an operation to fall apart because they're so, oh, this poor person, you know, I can't do the operation now with my hand shaking. You need that detachment, you know.
Someone that's thinking with their intellect instead, maybe with their an air sign.
Yeah, so if you got your moon in an air sign, you know, Libra, Aquarius, Gemini, it's actually it will actually be a useful thing, a positive thing, if you're doing something like surgery, or like if you're a politician or something like that. You know, to have that coldness, you know, detachment. You know, you can make your feelings detached from what you're saying and what you're doing. It can be a good thing.
Because for some people, this could explain why, you know, I've met people that think I'm really silly because I get so attached to animals, or if I see an animal in distress, but maybe they just don't have their moon sign in a place that would make them have that empathy.
Yes, and not only the sign. In astrology, of course, we have 12 houses, the 12 houses, and each one rules a different thing. So whichever house that your moon's in is also going to emotionally attach you to that area of life. So, for example, if your moon is in the first house, you're going to be very much in touch with your feelings about yourself. In your second house, you're going to be very attached to your possessions and your resources. In the third house, you're going to be very attached to your brothers and sisters and to communicating and to your neighborhood. In the fourth house, you're going to be very much emotionally connected to your family and your roots, and so forth. It goes on. So obviously the sign is important, but also the house is important as well with your moon sign. So somebody with the moon in the fifth house is going to be very much concerned with children and entertainment, the arts, and that sort of thing. Whereas if it's in the seventh house, they're going to be very attached to their partnerships, both professional and love
romantic or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So it is quite complicated. I mean, on top of that, we have what other planets your moon is reacting with, what we call aspects in astrology. You might have read in the newspapers or magazines, Scorpio, your sun is square. The sun is squaring Uranus today, or something, and this means that. It just means that the degrees the planets are apart. So if you're born with your moon next to Saturn, right? It doesn't matter which sign it's in or which house it's in, because of that closeness to Saturn. Your emotions are going to be very restricted. You're going to be somebody that can bottle up things and keep them in, and don't express them and don't show them. Whereas if it was right next to Mercury, you would just blurt out your emotions to everybody, right? But the way in which you would blurt them out and the areas in which you will talk about, again, will be governed by the sign and the house. You can see that we're getting very, very complicated here, because when you think there's 12 signs and there's 12 houses, so you've got 144 different combinations there to start with, just with that one placement. That's without taking into account what aspects the moon is making to other planets. Yeah.
So can we go on to Mercury? Because Mercury is about communication.
Indeed. It's Mercury. Yes,
the shortest circuit of the sun, doesn't it? I think it's 88 days. So that's going to have quite an
absolutely.
effect.
Mercury is very much about how you communicate. In the Greek and Roman mythology, Mercury was the messenger of the gods. He had the winged feet. He was actually unique that he could travel. He was the one person that could travel between the gods on Mount Olympus and the humans on the land, and all that. And he was also very much a trickster character. He loved to play tricks on people as well. And of course, he carries in his hand the caduceus, the two snakes around one wand, which is actually the logo of the British Medical Association, the BMA.
Because he carried that, I used to wonder, is that because he's a doctor as well, or is that somehow maybe he gave how to be healing to somebody else? It always made me wonder, why does he carry that?
There is no connection, as far as I know, between Mercury and healing or that. Why the BMA adopted that, I don't know. But it's quite interesting, of course, that when DNA was discovered, it's a double helix. It's like two snakes curled around one thing. So again, the symbology has sort of come through in some way.
I know why they've got it, because it's, I might say his name wrong, Asclepius, I think is how he says his name. He was the first doctor, and he learned medical ways by two snakes coming and giving him the information, and they twined around his stick.
That's
and
fantastic.
Used to whisper him how to heal somebody. So if someone came in, they'd be like, "This is what you do to heal this person."
Well,
so that became the emblem for medical societies.
Well, I've never heard that story, so that is absolutely fantastic. So you're never too old. You're never too old to learn anything, are you?
And like you say, it is the DNA symbol as well, which has been coming. Well, that got only discovered in the last 100 years, so it is very weird.
Well, I think it was in the 50s, wasn't it? It was the Crick and somebody, wasn't it? Yeah. Although there was a woman beforehand that postulated it,
was there? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I think Crick got it in a dream.
I think her name was Rosamund Franklin, I think her name was.
Okay.
And she did work on it beforehand, and she never got the credit, which is typical, isn't it? But well, anyway, getting back to what Mercury is about in astrology, is about how you speak, how you communicate, and so this is often why when you meet somebody and they're a Scorpio and you think, oh, they're not talking very Scorpionic. It might be because their Mercury is in Libra. You see,
affecting them in a different way.
yeah. So they will speak like a Libran, but in their core they are a Scorpio. So they'll just be able to put across those Scorpionic traits in a much nicer, balanced way, because Libra's the scales, you know, and Libra is all about the other person and all this. So yeah, so wherever Mercury is in your chart, which sign it's in, Mercury, because it's so close to the sun, like you say, it's the nearest planet to the sun. So astrologically and astronomically, it's only either in the same sign. Your Mercury will either be in the same sign as your sun sign, or it will be in one of the signs either side. It can't get any further away. And of course, Mercury can be the morning star and the evening star, and there's actually an astrological interpretation about that. But we don't need to go into that here. But it can be significant. Somebody that has Mercury in an air sign is usually very, very chatty. You know, somebody who's got it in an earth sign, they tend to be a bit more serious. Now, I actually have Mercury in Capricorn, so I can talk very seriously. But as I'm an Aquarian, I can also be very with a moon in Gemini, I can be very, very jokey as well. But it's meant to give me a mind like a computer. I'm very good at remembering facts. I'm not so good at remembering people's names or faces.
Oh, so you retain information.
Absolutely.
Okay. See, yeah. I'm the opposite to you. I have to learn things over and over again before it goes in. But I can remember people. I usually remember people's names, and I very rarely forget a face.
Yeah, I can remember the face. I just can't remember the name that goes with it. And when you're someone like me, that I go around doing talks on astrology, talks on runes, talks on dowsing and stuff, and I address all sorts of different conferences and different clubs and societies and all that. So, and I write books, so people know who I am. So they come up and say, "Oh, hello, Kev. Hello, Kevin." You know, as if they know me, and they might have met me perhaps many times, but I can't remember who the life they are.
Well, and being a public speaker does make you familiar, you know,
yeah.
doesn't it? So people feel they know you.
Yeah, I mean, most of the places I go to, I go to the Bolton Astrological Society. I go to the Phoenix Rising one in Manchester. You know, and I've been to the same pagan moots and things. So I should actually know these people because I've seen them many, many times, but I can't remember their names. And of course, if you've met someone many times, you can't just say, "I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Who are you?" So you have to just sort of carry on and hope somebody else comes up and says, "Oh, Karen or Fred," or "Ah, yeah, Fred." You know.
No, I know. I've been in that one myself. Actually, I've had strange moments like that, and you can see that they know I don't know their names. In the end, I just say I'm having a mind blank. Sorry, mind fog.
Yeah, you can say brain fog, brain freeze, can't you now? You know, so, or you can just say, "I'm going a bit senile."
Yes. I've been so busy today, my brain's not working. Who are you again?
Or you say, "I never forget a face, but I'll make an exception in your case." But I think that's a Groucho Marx joke. But anyway, so Mercury is all about how you communicate, and of course, like the sun and the moon, if it's making an aspect to other planets, that will also influence how you speak and what you will talk about, and the house placement will say what's the thing that is most on your mind that you want to talk about, because of course it's about communication, but it's also Mercury is about the mind. You know, it's about the way that you think, the way you're wired up in your brain. So again, well, all the planets are important, but Mercury is a very personal planet. Being so close to the sun, you know, it's obviously how you express that sun sign through your Mercury.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yes. And while we're doing it, Mercury, I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but viewed from Earth, there are 3 times in a year when Mercury appears to be going backwards in the sky, right?
Which is retrograde.
This is called retrograde motion, yes, retrograde. all the planets perform, except the moon and the sun, perform retrograde motion, but for different reasons. But when Mercury does it 3 times a year, which, you know, for 3 weeks at a time, and when Mercury is retrograde, astrologers believe that things go wrong, communication goes wrong. Phone, you know, the phone goes, and I've had 3 phone calls today. Mercury is retrograde at the moment, and I've had 3 phone calls a day on my landline, and each time nobody's left a message, right? And before we were doing this, weren't we? Suddenly my computer went woof and just shut down for no reason whatsoever. That's a Mercury retrograde thing. You communicate with somebody and say, I'll meet you at the supermarket at 7, and they turn up at 7 in the morning when you meant 7 in the evening. You know, it's all things like this. It's a lot of communication, but you can use this to your advantage because Mercury appears to be going backwards. It's a good time to be going over things that you should have done. So yesterday, I have this habit of when bank statements and bills and other stuff all come through, you know, medical appointments, whatever, I put them all on top of my printer. And when the pile gets to about an inch thick, I then think about actually dealing with it and filing it away. And so you're going back over things that have been delivered before the Mercury retrograde. So yesterday I spent about 2 hours going through all my finances and all the stuff on top of the printer and all these bills and letters and stuff, filing them away, sorting them out, throwing away what wasn't necessary. It's a good time for doing that. So like if you've been writing a book, for example, when Mercury is retrograde, it'll be a good time to go back over your manuscript and correct the grammar, have a look at oh, maybe I could have put that paragraph better, or maybe that would be better in chapter 2 than chapter 7, or whatever. So it's a good time to go back over things, you know, be it finances, things you've been working on, you know.
Yeah, maybe like you say, a retrospective of what you've been doing. Yeah. That's very good. So that's in Mercury retrograde to be doing this.
Yeah, that happens 3 times a year for 3 weeks at a time.
Right, okay then. And as you said, it's doing that at the moment, so it's going to be doing that for the next couple of weeks, maybe more, taking us into perhaps towards the end of February.
It went retrograde on the 24th.
Right, okay then. So yeah, another couple of weeks.
3 days ago, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say that next, because we were saying about the planets in your charts being next to each other or conjunction or whatever. It's not the same as when you look at the planets in the sky of, you've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. It's where they are as they're going in their elliptic.
In their orbits, yeah.
On your chart.
Yes. And it's a specific time. I mean, something I should clear up is that people talk about, oh, I'm on the cusp. So I'm a bit like Aries and I'm a bit like Taurus. No, you're not. Because the sun moves, well, obviously the sun doesn't move, it's us moving around the sun. But it's called the geocentric system. The heliocentric is sun-based because Helios was the sun god and all that. And that's looking at where the planets are from the sun's point of view. But because we live on the Earth, you know, you heard the word geography, obviously. Geo means Earth. So, you know, because we live on the Earth and we're here, so the sun appears to be moving across the sky and appears to be moving in different signs and all that. So, because of that, so when you're born, it's like if you could look at where all the planets are, if you see them, obviously you can't see some of them because they're going to be below the horizon, and you can't see the outer planets because they're too far away. You can't see them with the naked eye. But if you could, all an astrology chart is where the planets were at the time you were born, and an astronomer would agree with that as well. In fact, the Ephemeris, which is the book that astronomers use, is actually drawn up by astronomers. It's called the American Ephemeris, the planets are much more reliable than trains or buses. You know, we know exactly where the sun will be in 1,000 years' time, to the second. You know, it's absolutely amazing. You know,
but they follow a law and an order, don't they? And they don't deviate from it.
So you can't be on the cusp. You could be at 29 degrees 59 minutes and 59 seconds of Aries, but you're still in Aries. You're not on the cusp with Taurus, right? So there is this precise moment. So you actually, you can be on the cusp, but it doesn't actually mean anything astrologically. You are one sign or the other. There's a specific time to the second when the sun on any other planet moves from one sign into another. So it's called the critical degree, actually. The 29th degree and the 0th degree are both called critical degrees, and they're given a certain weight. If a planet is at that critical degree, they're given extra weight in astrology. So there we go with that. Shall we move on to Venus?
Venus, yes. Let's talk about Venus, which would be next after Mercury in the line of planets. But
that's
yes,
right.
Lovely Venus.
Venus is a very unusual planet. It rotates the opposite way round to others. Some would say it's associated with the feminine principle, and so women have to do everything different to everybody, to men, whatever. But also, Venus has another quality, is that a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus.
Right, I don't quite understand that.
So I know. A day is the time it takes for a planet to turn on its own axis.
Oh, of course. Right. Yes.
Right. Whereas a year is the time it takes to go around the sun once. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have the figures with me, but I do know that it takes Venus longer to turn on its axis once than it does to go around the sun once. So a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus, which is quite unusual. Venus is. Yeah, it's hard to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'm clocking it around in my head now, but I know what you're saying.
If you could live on Venus for a year, you would only see one sunrise and one sunset.
Peculiar.
It is very strange, isn't it? Venus is been called the Earth's sister because it's pretty much the same size as Earth, and it's the closest planet to us. So in that respect, but you wouldn't want to live on Venus because the atmosphere is all made up of acid. It's a very inhospitable place to live. It's all volcanoes and acid and stuff. So we won't be visited by Venusians in the near future, unless they're a very strange life form indeed. Now, Venus, of course, in mythology was the goddess of love. In Greek, Aphrodite, in Roman, Venus. And where Venus is in your chart, again, like Mercury, because of Venus's close proximity to the sun, in your astrology chart, it can only be in the same sign as your sun sign or the two signs either side. So if you're an Aries, then your Venus can only be in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, or Gemini. It can't be in any other sign. Okay. Venus, of course, is all about how you relate, where your love lies, and how you are when you're in love. And depending on which house it's in and which other planets are aspecting it, they affect it as well. I mean, I have Venus in the 6th house. The 6th house in astrology is the house of health, well, ill health actually, service and work, not career. That's the 10th house, but work. So I love serving other people, helping other people, and I like being in work. I've always been somebody, I've never been the boss. I've always been somebody who they turn to and I serve other people. I've worked in jobs where I'm a technician, so I'm actually serving the chief technician or the head of science or whatever. And I'm very happy in that role. I'm happy to serve. Also, although I'm quite healthy at the moment, I've had quite a few run-ins with ill health in my time. In fact, when I was at school, when I was at high school for the first time, when I was 11, 12, I was actually only there half the year because I kept being ill all the time and all that. I did come top of the year, I'm not saying, but that's the Mercury in Capricorn.
Yeah, so there's something else in your chart helping you.
That's right. I can revise for something the night before, remember it all the next day, regurgitate it out, forget it the next, because that's what exams are all about, aren't they?
Regurgitation.
I'm dead against all that parrot fashion regurgitating stuff. It's not it's not knowledge, it's not wisdom, it's just retaining some facts.
It's not right education at all, but hopefully that will change.
Absolutely. Well, I know you're the Rudolf Steiner, aren't you, of the school?
Yeah, I think them schools work very well. They teach people how to teach kids how to be kids and become adults, and they teach them how to live in a world which we need, rather than parrot fashion regurgitation of historical facts.
Yes, which have all been distorted anyway, because they never tell both sides of the story. History is only written by the victors, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
You never hear about the struggle of the poor people that they suppressed or whatever, but we're getting off the point there. But Venus is very much how you express your love. So, what will you love? You will love being the boss. You will love being yourself. You will love your partner, whatever. Love is expressed in many, many different ways. But how it is in your chart will show how you express your love. Are you going to be some sex mad person, or are you going to be somebody that's quite aloof and they don't want anything to do with that? That it's just they want an intellectual partnership relationship.
Or someone that is happy to just find their love of their life and stay with that person forever, rather than someone that's perhaps a bit more.
Or somebody that just loves animals, for example. Because animals don't break your heart, do they? Apart from when they pass over, but you know what I mean. Venus is very
what you're passionate about.
It is indeed. So obviously, if you've got Venus in the 12th house, you'll be very passionate about your art, for example, because the 12th house is ruled by Neptune and it's Pisces, and it's all about emotions and expressing your emotions very much. What you love. It's very difficult for people to understand the difference between love and emotions, because they're not quite the same thing. No. You can love somebody that you hate. The hate is the emotion, but the love. So the hate comes from Mars. So we could go on to that if you like.
Yes, let's go on to Mars, because Mars surprises me all the time. I didn't realise how small it is.
Oh yeah, it's only half the size of it. Yeah.
For one with such big myths about it, and such people talking about it being the planet of war and things like that. I looked it up. It's like, it's teeny.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Mars is of course is its color. It's the red planet. I should have mentioned that Venus is again, like Mercury, can be the morning star or the evening star because of its close proximity to the sun. And again, that has a meaning there. When again, there's astrological stuff about where if Venus is the morning star or the evening star in your chart, it has a different meaning. It's another overlay of interpretation. Much too complicated to go into here. That could be a 2-hour talk in itself.
We'll do that another time.
Yeah. Now Mars, because it's the red planet, the color of blood, has always been associated with bloodletting and war. And we say when someone loses their temper, they see the red mist, don't they, and all that. So Mars is very much, again, it's about your sex drive, it's about your anger, it's about your passion.
Is it linked to blood as well then?
Yes, because the reason that Mars is red is because it's iron oxide on its surface. And if you've ever cut yourself and tasted your own, when I cut myself on my thumb the other day using a knife that was far too sharp, and you suck it because when your saliva contains sterilizing
concealing gels,
yeah,
congealing rather. I said concealing, then I meant congealing.
But it actually tastes of iron because your blood has iron in it. So this is a very close thing with Mars is red and iron oxide and it's blood and associated with blood, and your blood is full of iron. There used to be a thing, if you have to eat spinach or take iron geloids and all this to if you've got a low iron level in your blood, then you're weak. Whereas if you've got a lot of iron, you're strong, and iron is strong and all this, And of course, in mythology, in Roman mythology, Mars or his Greek counterpart Ares, which is Ares, not Aries, Aries.
Mhm.
But of course, Mars rules the sign of Aries, so they get a little bit complicated. But Mars, of course, in Roman mythology, was the god of war. And if you got a strong Mars in your chart, then it's very good if you want to be a boxer or an athlete. In fact, there was a statistical analysis done. I think it was about in the 60s or the 70s, and they found that in champions, people that actually are world champions or Olympic gold medalists, there was a spike in the statistics of they had a very strong Mars in their chart, because Mars is very competitive. Mars, like Aries, Mars likes to be first, likes to be the winner, right? And it's very much about confrontation. If you've got a very badly placed Mars in your chart, you can be very fast to temper. But the great thing about being fast to temper is that you also are fast to calm down as well. So it's a bit like every actor in a soap opera. I don't watch soaps much, but because I can't stand all the aggression. But it seems you're a minute in and they're having a nice conversation, and one of them starts shouting and slamming the door. That's Mars for you. There's this aggression and anger and all that. So it's nice if you've got but it also is about energy. Mars is about energy. So it's about its placement in the chart is about where do you put your energy into. So if you've got Mars in the 7th house, you put your energy into your partnerships. It also the 7th house is also the house of open enemies. So it can also be you'll forever be finding somebody to pick a fight with.
So, I know people like that. Okay,
yeah. So
people that need to have an enemy to. I used to think they just like the drama, but maybe it's because of that.
Yeah. It's it figures very strongly also in the chart of murderers as well. Unfortunately. Again, statistical analysis. This isn't just me making it up or assuming. There's been a lot in astrology. There's a lot of statistical analysis done with people. There was one French scientist called Michel Gourquin, who actually set out to disprove astrology through statistical analysis. And actually, what happened was he did all this statistical analysis and ended up proving astrology, which is quite funny.
There's a film on Netflix about the flat earthers, and a flat earther went out to prove that the earth was flat, and his experiment proved that the world is a globe, and he's just looking at it, and it's all caught on film, and he's just looking at it, and you can see he's thinking no. But that's great. That's because I've often thought, I believe in astrology and the effects of the planets, not necessarily the sun sign in your newspapers every day, but how the planets affect us must come out in, like you say, our charts, or the day we're born, we must be affected by the energies coming from different planets. So
absolutely.
this goes well with it.
I mean, we are childs of the solar system, we're made of the same stuff as what the planets are made of, so they must have an effect. It stands to reason, and the more science is actually catching up with astrology, and they are actually finding the influence of the planets does have an effect. Obviously, it's not a gravitational thing. It's more a symbolic thing. But the thing with astrology is, the more you study it, the more proof you find.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary.
Because it's the vibrations and the energies coming off the planets as they're going through certain parts as they go around the solar system, which is why I was going to say wax and they're all interacting. I know that's a moon thing, but it's just they're coming closer and going away and coming back towards the Earth.
That's right. And astrology has been around for 5,000 years. If it was a load of rubbish, it wouldn't exist now. Like people don't wear suits of armor anymore, or go around in doublet and hose, or or farm with a scythe. Things move on, but astrology has moved on enormously as well. But the more research that's done into it, and the more of a precise science that it becomes, the more the more accurate it is. It's quite amazing. And I know tens of astrologers, and some of them are like doctors or solicitors and things, or they've been to university. That they're highly intelligent, very educated people, yet they still believe in astrology and use it. And something that you probably know is that for all the companies that deny about astrology, I know many astrologers that are employed by companies to vet job applicants and all this. It happens.
To help them with their monetary going forwards in their, how to what to put their money in next, how to develop things. The royal families use them, governments use them, but they keep all quiet about it because we live in a rational world now, so they can't be seen to be doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely,
we all know they do, because they know that the stars do affect us, and it's a part of the ancient wisdom, which is the true wisdom, and truth will always come through. So they just don't want us using it in case we use it against them.
Coming bang up to date on that. Almost every government announcement that's been going on with this COVID thing has come on a new moon or a full moon.
Or an equinox.
Yeah, or an equinox, indeed.
Yeah. And Boris did an announcement today, as we were saying earlier, it's a full moon tomorrow. He's done an announcement today that the lockdown's continuing. But he did, Boris Johnson did a book on, I think it was the Romans. Anyway, it has a chapter in it about astrology. So he knows his stuff. He knows how magical it is to use them certain dates to work the energies.
Absolutely. I mean, the most famous politician that used astrology in recent decades is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan has the inauguration at some peculiar time, about 2:30 in the morning or something.
Yeah. He had Jean Dixon working for him, one of the best psychics that was known for that time.
Yes, I believe. I know it's his wife, Nancy Reagan, wasn't it? Yeah. She had this astrologer, and I think she wrote a book saying, like, what does Jean say? Something like that.
I think you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I did read it, but probably about 20 years ago. And I know Reagan did a lot of his stuff through astrology, and he was a very successful politician. I mean, I remember reading, I think it was in the Daily Mail. Not that I take the Daily Mail. I was staying with my cousin in Norfolk, and her husband took the Daily Mail, and I remember them writing saying, if you took a walk through Ronald Reagan's deepest thoughts, you wouldn't get your feet wet.
Wow, that's quite deep. Yeah.
But I mean, Reagan ended the threat of nuclear war, didn't he? Because he started off with all his Star Wars stuff and all this, and he ended up, getting on well with Gorbachev, and they came to this SALT agreement and actually reduced the number of nuclear weapons. But I know that he was using astrology, with all that.
To help him so that he knew what days were the best days to perhaps communicate about that kind of thing. Or the best days to meet up with Gorbachev, perhaps, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, that time of that inauguration, by the way, is a branch of astrology called elective astrology, where you draw up a chart and you keep moving it around. Obviously, it's very easy to do now with computers. You keep moving the chart around until you get the best placement for when you want something to happen. Me and my second wife, last wife, whatever you want to call it, we actually drew up the day and time that we would get married based on astrology, which would be best for a successful relationship. Which happened to be the 12th of August, which is the day when the grouse shooting starts, the glorious 12th, and all that. But of course, again, like I was talking about with the solar returns, the hands of fate. I think we drew up the chart for something like 3:00 in the afternoon, and we booked that time. But the previous wedding we got married in a registry, obviously. It's a bit roll on, roll off.
Yep.
One lot are coming out as the next lot come in, and the previous one overran. So we actually didn't get married until something like about 3:20, which altered the chart completely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
again, if you want to give the gods a laugh, make a plan, so, but that was it. So,
Shall we
the
go
next
on to the next one? Would it be Saturn or Jupiter? I always get these two
Jupiter,
around the wrong way. Right.
Jupiter.
Okay.
There is a dwarf planet that between Mars and Jupiter is the asteroid belt, which is either a planet that broke up or a planet that didn't form.
I think it's a planet that broke up myself. I've often had that idea myself.
Within that asteroid belt is it's now called a dwarf planet. Is Ceres, right?
Ceres, isn't it?
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
It's where the word cereal comes from, because Ceres was the goddess of the crops of the field, right? And when Pluto in 2006 was reduced from being a planet to a dwarf planet, the definition of what made a dwarf planet made Ceres become a planet again. When Ceres was discovered in 1801, it was sort of as a planet, and it was for 70 years. And then when they found they decided to demote it to an asteroid, because it's an asteroid belt. But then when Pluto was made a dwarf planet, Ceres had to return as a planet again, as a dwarf planet. So there is Ceres, a dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, and that is used in astrology as well. I won't go into it because it complicates things, but
okay, right, because there is a big gap between, like you said, where the asteroid belt is. It does seem like there should be another planet there if everything went looking harmonious.
That's right.
In harmony.
And Ceres is in there, and Ceres, it looks like a planet. It's a big round object, about the size of Mars. So it does have a credible thing for being used in the charts, but not everybody uses it.
So it should still be given energies and vibrations coming off it that should affect us.
Yes, I will throw in one little fact about Ceres. In Ceres, because it's about food and about cereals and all that, it's also to do with eating disorders, and it was very prominent in the chart of Princess Diana. Right. So that I do a talk on Ceres called The Return of Ceres, and that's the one of the charts that I use in it is a chart of Princess Diana, because it shows her was it bulimia? Is it
bulimia? No, I can't say it.
No, I can't say it either. But it's an eating disorder, like anorexia.
When I studied the Vedic astrology course, we used Diana's chart, and Diana was still alive at the time. And I was with Camilla Sutton was my teacher, and she was saying on this chart, she says, it says here she will never be queen. I can't remember if she was divorced by then or not, Diana. She might have been divorced by then, but she was saying, Camilla saying, in this chart it shows that she will never be queen.
Yes, I actually personally know one of the astrologers that Princess Diana used.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, I'm bound by confidentiality on this, but yes, and she used to actually come to Blackpool for consultations in secret at the astrologer's office, and all this, and again, she told her she would never be queen from what was in her chart. Yeah, but that's by the by. We'll move on to Jupiter.
Yes. Great big planet.
The king of the gods. Jupiter is one of the brightest things in the night sky. It looks like a very, very, like Venus, it looks like a very bright star. I mean, the sun and the moon are the brightest things. That's why they're known as the luminaries or the lights. But of course, Venus and Jupiter are both very, very bright. Jupiter is in fact a failed star. It should have become a star. Venus actually gives out more light from itself than it receives from the sun, which is why it's so bright in the night sky. And I think the Earth fits into Jupiter's sun like 1,300 times. It's an enormous planet. It's the thing that saves us from all the asteroids that are going to destroy us like they did the dinosaurs, because It's like a Hoover, and it's so huge and such a big gravity pull that it sucks in anything that might come near us. So it's actually very useful for like that. Anyway, Jupiter was the king of the gods, and he rules the sign of Sagittarius in the chart. And because of this, that he gives out more than he gets in astrology, Jupiter is the planet of expansion, right? So wherever in your chart Jupiter is and what sign it's in, that's the sign that gets expanded, right? So if it's in Sagittarius, you're going to be somebody that, well, in the worst case, open mouth, insert foot. You just blurt it out before you think. Actually, I shouldn't have said that. But also, it's very good for if it's like I say Sagittarius, it's very good for dancing and partying and being over the top. OTT,
So it's like the extrovert.
Very much so. And so whatever sign, whatever house it's in your chart, that is where you are going to go really over the top and you're going to expand it. So the good thing about it is it rules. Jupiter is associated with Sagittarius and the ninth house, and this is about further education. So it's about expanding your mind through education, further education, university, whatever, or travel, of course, as well. They say travel broadens the mind, don't they?
Yes.
Well,
it does.
This is very Jupiterian, So, if you've got a strong Jupiter in your chart, you will love traveling the world and, having adventures and experiences, very adventurous, having a great time. Anything that will expand your mind in any way whatsoever or expand your experiences. So, unfortunately, if you had like Jupiter on your ascendant, you could be very prone to being overweight because you're expanding yourself and how you look.
I see, yes.
So, it can give a great love of big meals and cake and stuff like that. So if you got Jupiter in the 10th house, you're going to want to expand your career and have a bigger experience as possible. You're not going to be some, wallflower in the background. You'll want to be out there and hello, I'm here.
Yeah, going to the top.
It's very much what Jupiter is about. And of course it can get you in trouble because you can take things a bit too far. So you can often find it in the charts of criminals that push their luck because Jupiter they think they're very lucky. They think that they're untouchable. That I can do this and I'll get away with it, but you don't always.
Yeah, I can understand what you mean because I'm not saying I'm a criminal or I know criminals, but I'm quite intrigued by how criminals think they can get away with stuff. Some of them do some preposterous crimes that you're just like, why did they think they could do that? But they obviously think they can. They've got that mindset that they're going to do this and get whatever it is they need.
Absolutely, it's it can be a joy. I mean, the name for Jupiter is Jove. It's where we get the word jovial and by Jove and all that. It's a very happy party, having a good time sign. If you've got Jupiterian people around you, you can feel wonderful. It's great, but everything comes with a price. You get the hangover, you get your house wrecked by your partying and all the rest of it.
Police can catch you if you're a criminal.
Yeah,
prison beckons.
Yeah, Jupiter is a party animal. So and of course, remember Jupiter is the god that threw the lightning bolts. So you can come crashing down to Earth and get hit by a lightning bolt, which is where things go wrong.
So there can be shocks. Yes.
Well, shocks are more associated with Uranus, but yes, absolutely. You can think you're going to get away with it. It's about going too far sometimes, which is where I said about the open mouth insert foot. It's a Sagittarian. Will tell you that they'll tell you the truth, but maybe it's not the most polite thing to do at the time, or not what they need to hear.
Maybe too frank.
That's Jupiter for you. In contrast, when we move on to Saturn, it's exactly the opposite. Saturn is known as the rings planet. I had a beautiful experience of seeing Jupiter through a powerful telescope many years ago at an observatory just out at Longridge, just outside Preston. And it was wonderful to actually see the rings around Saturn, right? Now, Saturn is known as Old Father Time. Is also known as the Grim Reaper, right? Saturn in antiquity was the furthest point of the universe. It was well, the solar system. It was where things ended. You know, it was thought there was nothing beyond Saturn but the stars. Of course, we now know there's lots of other planets before. So Saturn kind of was the limit, right? It was the limit of the solar system. And so in astrology, it's regarded as that. And we talk about Saturn being a rings planet, and Saturn puts rings around you. It restricts you, right?
Good.
It's the limit. It's the limit. If you've got a strong Saturn in your chart, Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn, which is a very austere, down to earth. It's an earth sign. It's probably the most down to earth sign there is. Capricorns are very, very serious. I talked about my Mercury in Capricorn, you know, being a serious thinker. Well, Capricorns are very serious people. They tend to be the boss, right? They make very good bosses because they understand the rules and the regulations. If you think about it, the way that we grow strong as human beings, especially in physically, is pushing against things, doing weightlifting, you know, running, walking, discipline. Capricorn Saturn is very much about discipline and doing things the right way and making lists and being ordered, and the structure. In the human body, Saturn rules the bones and teeth, which are the things, you know, if you haven't got a skeleton, we'd just be a jelly on the floor, wouldn't we? The bones are what hold us up, you know, that they are the strong thing. So Saturn is very much about structure, restriction, limitation, and the rules and the laws and doing things the right way. And you know, what happened? But if as an astrologer, when you have somebody come to you, the easiest question to ask somebody is, what happened to you when you were 29? Right?
Saturn's return.
That's right. Saturn has a 20. I mean, I haven't talked about the orbits much, but Saturn has a 29.5-year cycle. So when you reach 29, around 29, obviously because the planet's orbits are elliptical and not a circle, you can't say exactly it'll be 29.5. You can have your Saturn return at 28, you can have it at 30, but around about 29, and because you will get your Saturn return. Saturn will return to the place it was exactly in the zodiac when you were born. And the Saturn return, because Saturn is about responsibility and rules and laws and restrictions, this is usually the time when people get married, have a kid, buy a house, make a will, all these Saturnian things. And it never fails to work exactly. You could, if there's one thing that you can always guarantee in astrology, ask somebody what happened to them when they were 29, or indeed when they were 58. If they obviously you can't ask somebody who's 35 what happened to you when you were 58, but you know, this is what you always have to relate.
Yeah, the older generation, you mean, when they come for a reading.
Yeah. So Saturn, because it at the time of when astrology was first written about, which we're going back 2,000 or 3,000 years here, Saturn was the limit of it, and Saturn plays a very important part. But it still does today. If you think about it, when you're 7, Saturn has moved 90 degrees away from where you were. It's a quarter through the orbit. It's called the Saturn square. 90 degrees, you know, 90 degrees makes a right angle triangle. 90 degrees is a square. So when you get that, which is about when you're 7, it's about when you stop being regarded as a child with no responsibilities anymore. You know, you're sentient enough to know the difference between right and wrong, and you know, in some schools, don't tell me which country it is, but I know some schools don't start their kids until they're 7. I mean, I know we start here when you're 5, but really, your first 2 years at school, you're just playing with the sandpit, aren't you? Really, you know.
Learning to mingle.
Yeah, it's just learning your social skills. But when you're 7, you start to actually have to learn the alphabet and, you know, how to do sums and stuff. So you get that first sort of responsibility of you're not just a product of your parents. You know, you're developing yourself. When you're 14, of course, you're entering your teenage years, and you start. And here in Britain, you start your exams, you know, and you start thinking of your options of what are you going to do with your life when you're 14. And of course, 21, which is well, I should say the 14 is the Saturn opposition. Saturn is opposite where it was in the zodiac from where you were born. When it reaches the next one, it's now 90 degrees away, approaching the Saturn return. So you're now moved 270 degrees. So you're getting another square. And 21, of course, always used to be the age of consent. And, you know, 21 today, you got the key of the door, never been 21 before and all that. Although we tend to think of adults now as 18 because they've moved it back. But 21 was when you're an adult and your own person, and, you know, it's time to go out into the world and do your own thing and be responsible. That very Saturnian word for yourself.
Because it's also the time, if you went to university straight from school, that would be the time when you'd be leaving university, you'd be starting hopefully on your life's path of whatever it is you've chosen.
Absolutely. So these Saturn aspects, you know, as Saturn moves through, you know, every 7 years, you know, I mean, of course, we all know about the 7-year itch, don't we? You know, every 7 years, you know, it's considered to be an interesting block of time. Is 7? I mean, 7 is a very important number.
It's a very magical number, isn't it?
You know,
yes.
7 days of the week, you know, etc., etc. Well, indeed, 7 planets of antiquity from the Sun out to Saturn. You know, 7 was very much a very important number, and still is, of course.
Yeah, in a lot of occult teachings and writings, that 7 is important to understand what it does and why it's there. It's
and even lucky 7, you know, considered a lucky number.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
it was used the most in the lottery. Apparently, it comes up. It's one of the numbers that comes up the most, and it's also one of the numbers that most people pick when they're buying their lottery tickets.
Indeed, and probably 13 is the one they avoid. Anyway, that's another thing. But Saturn plays a very important part in your life. And the first, you know, you have sort of 3 stages in what people realize at 29 is as they're approaching 30, that they're not young anymore. They tend to think of, oh my God, I'm 30. I know we now have 40 is the new 30 and 60 is the new 20 and whatever, all these other things. But 30 is really, when you're 20, you know, you're still young, aren't you? You're only just out.
You've got your life ahead of you, and you think, oh, yeah, you're never going to grow old.
But that's right. But when you're 30, it's real like, you know, you're old bones now. You know, to get back to the Saturnian thing, and you start thinking, I'm a third of the way through my life. You know, I'm now approaching middle age. It's quite a significant point in your life. People think, oh my God, I'm 30. You know, I remember this myself. My wife at the time presented me with a cake with me in a coffin.
Oh, that was nice.
Which is very, I mean, she knew nothing about astrology, and neither did I then. But
you were picking it up.
Me playing the guitar, saying never too old to rock and roll, you know. But yeah, and I remember when I was 30, the hairdresser saying, "Oh, you're 30. Oh, you are kind of a bit thin on top, you know." And you sort of realise that your body's not growing anymore. It's now you're now into the over the hill, so to speak. And from now on, you know, you're past your peak. And
in some ways, it's the time that people, because of this kind of thinking, they start thinking, right, they're going to change their ways, don't they? And
yeah.
know a lot of people do change their lives at that point, don't they, and take a different path.
They do.
Or you could stay on the same path and carry on as you are and grow old and be, just follow the normal routine.
Interestingly, that actually moves us quite nicely onto Uranus and the midlife crisis.
Come on, then, let's do Uranus.
Right. Now, Uranus, of course, was discovered by William Herschel in the 18th century. He was a telescope maker by trade, as well as a composer, and he was in his garden in Bath, or Bath, as
they say down there.
I say Bath, but
I call it Bath too.
Oh, right. Okay, we both posh together. So I've actually been. William Herschel's house in Bath is actually a museum to him, to the Herschel Museum, and he was a composer. And while you're in there, they play all his classical music, which is nice, and his telescopes are there, and you can actually see the telescope that he discovered Uranus with. Uranus is actually mostly cannot be seen with a naked eye. Under certain conditions, certain atmospheric conditions, and when Uranus is closest to Earth, and you know where to look, you can actually see Uranus with the naked eye, but it's pretty rare. This is why it wasn't discovered until the 18th century with a telescope. It was the first object to be discovered with a telescope.
Because some say it was his sister that saw it.
Yes, indeed. His sister was a great telescope maker as well, polishing lenses, and she actually discovered a couple of comets as well. So she should be as famous as him, but of course, the sexist attitudes of the 18th century, blah blah blah. Now Uranus has an 84-year cycle. It takes Uranus 84 years to go around the sun once. So if you're lucky enough to get your Uranus return, you'll be 84 when it happens. But for most people, we get the Uranus half return, which happens when you're about 40, 41, 42. It happened to me when I was 40. And being an Aquarian, it's meant to be the time that you break up and go wild and you have your midlife crisis. I actually got married on my Uranus return, on my Uranus half return, I should say, Uranus opposition. So Uranus was opposite where it was when I was born. So I actually went against the convention, and instead of breaking out and wanting freedom, I actually restricted my freedom and got married, so to speak. That's an Aquarian thing to do, But anyway, that aside, this is why when folks get to 40, 41, 42, men start buying motorbikes and sports cars, or doing all this midlife crisis stuff, because you realize half your life's gone, if you like, and also, of course, normally by that time your children have grown up and left, so you've got some freedom. Uranus is about freedom. Uranus is the only planet that rotates on its side. When we look, it's about 84 degrees. 84. It spins on its side, actually. When you look at Uranus through a telescope, you are looking at the North Pole of it, because it's on its side.
You mean, so right? Okay.
It's
angled. Going round like that.
I think it might be something like it's about 80, 83, 84, something 9 degrees. Like the Earth is only 23 degrees from the vertical, right? From the vertical axis, which is why we get the seasons. But Uranus is actually, it's like a top spinning on its side. So this makes it very much a rebel, a very much a maverick planet. It's not like the others that all spin in the same way with their poles towards the north always, So Uranus is very much about the unusual. Uranus rules Aquarius, and Aquarians tend to be people that think in different ways. They value their freedom. It's a very strange sign, Uranus, because it likes to be individual, but it likes to be friends. So when an Aquarian goes to high school, They don't like wearing the uniform because it makes them look the same as everybody else. But they want to be, and they want to be an individual. But of course, they also want to fit in and be friends with everyone. So it's a bit of a dilemma, and it's a bit of a quandary for Aquarians and Uranian people. Anybody that has Uranus very strong in their chart will be of a Uranian character. They'll be a bit of a rebel. I mean, Johnny Rotten, for example, is an Aquarian. He practically invented punk rock, and it didn't matter what people said. I remember him being interviewed once and said, well, a lot of people think this, and he said, well, a lot of people are wrong. Very much individual, free thinking, independent, rebellious. These are all things associated with Uranus. Uranus was actually discovered, by the way, at the time of the American War of Independence and the French Revolution. So Uranus is very much associated with revolution. Uranus, because of its slow orbit, because it takes 84 years, which incidentally, William Herschel, who discovered Uranus, only lived 84 years. He died when he was 84. So he actually lived one Uranian orbit.
That is strange, isn't it? That's quite peculiar.
It's a strange, one of those strange things. But yes, because Uranus moves so slowly, it's known as a generational planet, whereas the other 7 planets that we've talked about so far are personal planets, right? Because they're very much that, Uranus takes 7 years to go through a sign. So millions and millions of people are going to be born with Uranus in whatever sign. So it doesn't really fit in. You can't say, oh, you've got Uranus in Aquarius, or you've got Uranus in this, it means that, because that's going to be millions of people. It's going to be the house placement in the chart that is going to be more significant, or any personal planet that's next to. It doesn't matter what sun sign, what zodiac sign your sun is in. If Uranus is next to it, you're going to be Uranian, right? You're going to be that unusual Cancer that doesn't like being at home and doesn't like their family and wants to go out and do their own thing. Being very independent, very, very different to a Cancer that's got no connection with Uranus. These are the things that you will have to weigh up when we're doing an analysis of a chart. So Uranus is also about the bolt from the blue. Uranus is blue in color, and Uranus is about shocks. And it's often when somebody has what we call a transit of Uranus. This means where Uranus is now, or where Uranus is now in the zodiac. If it's affecting natal planets, where your planets are in your horoscope, in your birth chart, then you can be in for a shock of some kind. So if Uranus, for example, was by transit, where it's moving through the solar system, is conjunct your Mars, you might suddenly find that you're erupting all the time. That you're suddenly you feel angry about everything, and you're not normally angry about, and you don't know why. And it's because of Uranus bringing this shock. If it affects your moon, you could suddenly find that you're pregnant, or you've made somebody pregnant, for example. As a shock, something that wasn't planned. You could lose your job.
Unexpected happens.
Absolutely. So we use the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are very much looking for generational things and what's happening. Those 3 outer planets, we look at them when we look at in relation to like a country's chart, for example, because countries, just like people, are born and they live and they die. We've seen this very much with what's been happening with like the fall of the Soviet Union and all these new countries, like Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, or it's called Czechnica or something, isn't it? And Yugoslavia was formed in the wake of World War II, and it's now 2 or 3 different countries. So when a new country is formed, that has a chart, right? So you can look at the chart of a country and see, oh, Uranus is going over its sun. there's going to be a change of the president there, or the king's going to die, or something like this, or the queen, or whatever. So,
So do you think
it'll
you
be
was
something
doing something
shocking.
a bit strange when 2020 started, because it came with a bit of a shock?
Indeed. This is mundane astrology. This is called, and you look at the charts of where the planets are now, and you look at the charts of the countries, and you say, oh well, this could be a very difficult time for America, or whatever. This is not something that I do generally. I don't tend to look at the charts of countries. Indeed, towns have charts as well. Well, when a town becomes a city, that changes. Preston became a city in 2000. It was one of several that the Queen upgraded from being a town to a city. So, and it happens at midnight. So midnight on the 1st of January 2000 is now the chart of the city of Preston. And you could look at that, and there's a chart for Blackpool, which we often look at in what's happening to Blackpool at the moment, blah, blah, blah. So you can actually look at these outer planets and what's happening with regard to the chart of it. I personally don't do that. What I do, the only mundane astrology I do, which I do for our Icarus newsletter, the online newsletter that goes out on the equinoxes and solstices, is I do the chart of the equinox or the solstice for Blackpool, and I interpret that in what's going to be happening in Blackpool in the next 3 months.
And how is it for the next 3 months? Is it still going to be in lockdown?
Yes. I predicted that the winter solstice.
The winter solstice, yeah.
I did a 20-minute talk for Northern Lights and anybody else that wanted to come to our Zoom meeting, because obviously we're not meeting in person. So I think we had about 35, 40 people at that, and I did about 20 minutes on the chart of the winter solstice. And one of the things I said was the lockdown's going to continue at least until the vernal equinox, the 21st of March. Yeah. So, but that's the only mundane astrology I do. I don't tend to look at the charts of countries and what's happening. But wherever Uranus is, it's affecting you as an individual. It's affecting your country in some way, and it will be a surprise, something you're not expecting. It can be a positive thing. It doesn't have to be negative,
Yeah, the surprises can be good or bad, because I find it quite interesting. This tiny little planet that hardly anybody knows about has such a big impact with its surprise, its unexpectedness and things. I think that's quite sweet about it. Because when we finish, I've got my chart over there, and I thought I meant to have it with me when we were doing this, but I've left it all the way over there. I'm going to go check my Uranus. I nearly said Uranus then, but some people call it Uranus.
Some people call it Uranus. Do you remember Mrs. Merton?
When she had her soul, yes.
When she had Russell Grant. I mean, I know Russell very well. He's the president of my club, and when he was on Mrs. Merton actually asked him, "Do you think a man will ever be found on Uranus?"
No. And he took it really well.
He did take it well.
Yeah,
well Russell's got a great sense of humour. He does have that Jupiter in his first house, which affects his weight, and all that. But anyway, so that's Uranus. Shall we move on to Neptune?
Let's do Neptune.
Right. Neptune, like Uranus, is another outer planet and a gas giant. Neptune has a orbit of something like 160 years. So unless you can live to 160, you're never going to get a Neptune return. So in fact, I think since the discovery of Neptune, I think Neptune has now only done one orbit since it was discovered. So we've only observed it through the 12 signs of the zodiac once in recent history, if you like. Now, Neptune is known as nebulous Neptune. With Neptune, it rules the sign of Pisces. With Neptune, nothing is ever crystal clear, or unlike Saturn, where everything is permanent and static, with Neptune, everything is very much like a fog. It's a bit of a blur, right? But Neptune is very good for the arts. It's, people with strong Neptunes tend to be mystics and dreamers and creative people. It's very good for being artistic and a dancer or songwriting. It often features very strongly in the charts of musicians, does Neptune. So a famous example of that is Mark Bolan, who had the Sun conjunct Neptune in his 10th house, which is career. So obviously was destined to be a career as a songwriter. But he also wrote very mystical songs about dwarves and elves and mystical places and stuff and all this. And that comes from his Neptune in the 10th. The thing with Neptune is you can't grab it. It's like when you're having a strong Neptune transit, it's like things go a bit fuzzy, and you're taken away. It's also to do with drugs, escapism. So you can escape through music, you can escape through creative writing, but you can also escape through drink and drugs, which is also associated with Neptune. And indeed, Mark Bolan had his problem with drink and drugs after his shining star has faded a bit in the mid-70s. So this is the problem, and also the beauty of Neptune is that it has a positive and a negative thing. And Neptune is also, it rules the sign of Pisces, as I say, and it's to do with victims, right? You can very much, when you're having a Neptune thing, feel that you're in the end of a lot of bad luck and you're the victim. But it's also about again, restriction of a different kind, and we're talking about institutions. So we're talking about hospitals, prisons, asylums, right? So the way to deal with a Neptune in your chart, if you've got it very strongly in your chart, is to be the prison warden or to be the doctor or the nurse, right? So that you're dealing with the same energy, but you're not being a victim to it. You're being a master or a mistress of it. So you're dealing with the same energy. It's exactly the same thing, but it's better to be on the positive side of it than the negative side of it.
I thought it was interesting when you said about Neptune being a bit foggy, but it's rules Pisces, and Pisces is all dreamy. So there's all a bit, the connection just continues all the way through, doesn't it?
Yes, and it rules the 12th house. In the natural zodiac, where Aries is the first house. I mean, I'll probably confuse things here, but we have the natural zodiac. Aries is the first house, Taurus is the second, Pisces is the 12th house. Often it's called the dustbin of the zodiac. It's where we hide things that we don't want people to see. We don't want them to see our negative side, our escapist nature, that they don't want us to see that we've got a drink problem or a drugs problem or whatever, or that we've been in prison. Or we've been in a mental asylum, or we've been very ill. It's not the sort of thing that we want to show very much. So we tend to hide it. It's also, the 12th house is also the house of hidden enemies, and also hidden relationships, assignations,
Okay. Yeah.
Often people with a strong Neptune can be they don't have boundaries. Neptunian people don't have boundaries. They will quite happily cheat on their partner or steal from their work, or take all sorts of risks, because they feel they're not going to get caught. They think that it's nebulous, and the facts are going to be a bit too fuzzy, and they won't be able to be pinned down and
then they get away with it.
And they get away with it.
Right.
Or they'll say, "Oh, well, I'm confused."
Made me do it.
Yeah, and they will, and they will talk their way out of it as well, or they'll feed you. It's the planet of fake news, if you like. Of spreading lies, a smoke screen, if you like, as well. We talked about Neptunian things being foggy and fuzzy and all that. Also, there can be a smoke screen of you can't quite grab it. You can't get to the truth with Neptunian. I've experienced a lot of this. My best friend, who I won't name for obvious reasons, he has Neptune on the ascendant. Now, despite the fact that he's a Leo, he's very, very Neptunian. He's actually an artist. He's a very, very talented artist. Also a champion of disabled rights, and disability is another thing associated with Neptune. Again, the victim, as we're seeing it. Although obviously we don't like to see disabled people as victims, but yes, they are in general in society. And so he's actually used that Neptunian energy to be a champion of disabled rights, rather than being a victim to the disability, if you see what I mean. But he's also, a very talented artist. But you try and pin him down, you can't even get. I can't even get him to arrive at the right railway station. There's only 2 railway stations there's 3. There's the Pleasure Beach, but there's Blackpool South and Blackpool North. And he would tell me he's arriving at Blackpool North at 5 o'clock. I get there at 5 o'clock, and he's ringing me up and saying, "Where are you?" "I'm at Blackpool South." And things like that. And he had this girlfriend that used to tell him the most ridiculous things, like she'd been abducted by Muslims in a taxi and all this. And I'm saying, this is rubbish. This can't be true. And he would believe it because of that Neptunian sort of innocence. So, Neptune can be it can be very creative, but it also can be, it can be very frustrating if you're trying to deal with someone who's very Neptunian, because you will never get them to obey anything. You can say, "Oh, we'll talk again next Sunday," and Sunday comes and goes, and you ring them up and say, "You wanted to contact me." "Oh, I forgot." I got reading this book. "Oh, I was watching this film." Neptune is about music. It's about film as well. And anything creative, anything escapism is to do with Neptune. So,
I like
very different.
Neptune.
Yeah. I mean, Neptunian people tend to absolutely love it. They like it that everything's confusing and they're living their life in a dream.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Pisces, and probably I'm pretty sure I've got a strong Neptune. And I'm not saying I like everything chaotic. I don't like that, but I don't like doing the same thing day by day. I don't like routine, which is what most people do. That's why I've probably found myself the lockdowns are a bit much for me.
No, routine is a totally antithesis. Routine is a total antithesis to a Neptunian, a Piscean. They don't want that. It's got to be far out, man.
So from my own perspective, carrying on what you're just saying, I've been trying to use that energy during the lockdowns to do different things. Okay, I can't go anywhere, but try and do different things at home and start different projects that I probably wouldn't have thought about but never actually done. But this was my opportunity to start doing things. So that's been, how the lockdowns have worked for me, I suppose. It's made me do projects and use that creativity and
it's about
to any routine.
What we're doing now is very Neptunian in a way. This isn't pre-planned, is it?
No.
We're not working to a script. We're just free falling and just talking as we are. Yeah. So we'll move on to the last one, shall we? Pluto.
Little Pluto.
Now
it a
Pluto.
Planet?
I have Pluto on the ascendant.
Oh.
Now, Pluto is the furthest planet from the Sun of the standard 10 planets in astrology, and it has a cycle of something like 250 years. So you're never going to, Pluto was only discovered in 1930. It was postulated in 1916, but it wasn't found until 1930. So we've only had Pluto around now, for 90 years. So we haven't even seen, a third, well, probably just about a third of what Pluto could do through the different signs. The most, the most Pluto is now in Capricorn, and when Pluto entered Capricorn, because it's a generational one and it affects us in mundane astrology. When Pluto entered Capricorn, this was when we had the financial crisis, and the banks all crashed and all that, and we had all that, and that was actually predicted at a talk at Northern Lights a couple of years before. That they said specifically, it was actually the president of the Astrological Association of Great Britain we had as our guest speaker, and he predicted that Pluto into Capricorn would mean a financial crisis. I mean, he didn't specifically say, and the banks are all going to do this and all that, but the general tendency you could see this is what's going to happen, because Capricorn is about structure, and what Pluto is about death and rebirth. It's about destroying something so that it can be born again, right? So Pluto is very much about death and beginnings and endings and all this sort of thing. But it's the word that we tend to use in astrology is transformation. It's a changing of one energy into another, because energy can never be destroyed, it can only be changed. And Pluto is very much about that. Pluto is also Hades, he's the god of the underworld. He's to do with all things shady. It's gangsters, oilmen, drilling underground, all this sort of stuff, Pluto. But it's very much, and I mean, I'm always dressed from head to toe in black because I have Pluto on the ascendant. Although I have Virgo rising, I have Virgo is my ascendant. When people see me, they tend to think I'm a Scorpio. Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio, which is the sign of death and rebirth as well. The scorpion is reputed to sting itself to death so it can be reborn, and it hides under the ground, so it's the underworld, and all things to do with the underworld are to do with Pluto. All things that are hidden, it's the things it's the dark secrets, our dark side that we never want to expose. That's what you find with Pluto there. So with Pluto strong in your chart, you tend to be somebody that can often be a bit heavy and a bit looking for the worst in people and their dark side. Though Plutonian people, like Scorpios, want to get to the bottom of things. I do remember when my ex-wife, she worked in the job centre, and the fraud squad had 4 people in it in Blackpool, and they were all Scorpios. Because they wanted to find out people's dark side, get to the bottom of it, and they will keep digging and digging and delving. Plutonian people will do this until they get to the truth. They will dig and dig and dig, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. And also, they can be very they might forgive, but they never forget. Right? If you wrong a Plutonian person, they will hold that against you forever. They might still be your friend, but they will always remember that you slighted them in some way. So if they got Scorpio rising, Pluto on the ascendant, Pluto in the 8th house, or Sun in Scorpio, or lots of planets in Scorpio, these are all Plutonian people, and they never forget a wrongdoing towards them.
So they've got their little black book with all the marks in it.
Yeah.
Tick for you, cross for you.
If you when you have a Pluto transit, when Pluto is moving over a planet or your ascendant or one of the other angles in your chart, like the ascendant or the midheaven or the IC, Pluto comes and it destroys, but it destroys so it can be rebuilt again. When Pluto went over the bottom of my chart, it's the IC, it's the cusp of the 4th house. I lost everything. I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost my house, and I moved to Blackpool. But I turned up in Blackpool with my car, with a car full of possessions, and that was all I had. It strips you down, it takes everything away, but that's so that it can regrow. It's much like the forest fires, or like you have in Australia and California and all that. It might destroy everything, and you hear it on the news of, these people have died and they've lost their houses and all that. But then after that burning, when everything's been taken away, new growth comes. right?
Yeah.
You never hear about that.
No.
It's always, oh, this terrible, these terrible forest fires, but they're there for a purpose. And I remember when I lived in Norfolk, in the autumn, the farmers in the time of Scorpio, funnily enough, the farmers would set fire to the fields to burn them, ready so for the new growth, the next. And this is what happens. So you might lose your business, you might lose this, but it's for a purpose. It's for a plutonian purpose, and it's so that you can grow again, and you'll be stronger and richer, because plutocracy, plutocracies are countries that are run by the rich, right? So what happens is when you hit this Pluto transit and you lose everything, it's so that you can grow back and be stronger and be richer than you were before. But it might not feel like it at the time, but it does pan out over a long course, because Pluto is in the long term. Interestingly enough, when Pluto entered Scorpio in the 80s, that was when AIDS came about, funnily enough.
Interesting. So that would be like a well, I have different views about AIDS myself, and what the virus actually was, and whether it was man-made or not. So that's quite an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, well, Scorpio rules the reproductive organs of both sexes, and of course, AIDS could only be transmitted through sexual contact.
Yeah.
So Pluto being in that, and of course, it brought about death, didn't it? I mean, nobody dies of AIDS now because they got, you can be HIV and not get AIDS now because they got drugs and all that. It's not an issue anymore like it was in the 80s. It was like you got AIDS, you're going to die. That was it. In the 80s, that was very Pluto in Scorpio. When it moved into Sagittarius, everything became a lot more sporty, because Sagittarius, everyone was wearing shell suits and stuff like that. And you started to get the London Marathon and all this stuff. This is how these outer planets cycles affect the world, not only one country. So we've currently got Pluto in Capricorn. It will leave eventually. I think 2024 is when it leaves, and I think it might take another 3 years to get rid of this blasted COVID.
Well, this is what I've been hearing from various people actually, who are astrologers actually, and I've been told that 2022 we've got a certain special alignment that will hopefully start shifting things back towards, it's never going to be the same again, but back onto a better path, and then that would go on till 2024.
Well, we've currently got a lot of planets in Aquarius. We've got Jupiter, Saturn, Sun, Mercury, and Venus, I think it is. We've got about 5 planets in Aquarius. This hasn't happened since 1962, which was the dawning of the New Age. When, funnily enough, astrology, tarot, runes, and everything came back through the New Age movement and the hippies and everything. So, and it was like a mini dawning of the age of Aquarius, and we've got that again now.
So hopefully it's the dawning of an age of awakening and consciousness and using their conscience.
And very much, and technology, of course, as well. Because Uranus, I didn't mention it, but Uranus also rules technology.
And we've got all the transhumanism and the AI issues coming up, which
that's right.
Round,
absolutely.
Something I was concerned about for many years.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. You're spot on. I mean, what are we seeing it now? You got your mobile phone. Mine's turned off, so it hasn't gone off during this interview.
Same here. I remember to turn mine off.
And my landline's unplugged, so nothing should interrupt. But I mean, with this, 30 years ago, I'd need a record player, a cassette player, a landline, a calculator, and everything. You need a room full of technology, yeah. And now it's there. This is the Uranian thing. This is the age of Aquarius for you. So we're seeing it. We're seeing it now. So it's actually the technological advances. A mobile phone. 20 years ago, when you see it in these films, and they're like a brick with a big aerial and all this. and now, you know, they're tiny. You know, it's absolutely amazing, and that's the technological thing. So we're going to see with all these planets in Aquarius at the moment. You know, we're going to see huge technological advances in this coming year.
And I do predictions about that in my book, Monkey Mind, Robot Body, if anyone's interested. Quick plug.
Excellent. Get the plug in, Debbie. Get the plug in.
Well, what about you? Because if people wanted your books, they've got to contact you directly, haven't they?
They have. My books aren't on sale anywhere. I'm very much a control freak, if you like, with that Pluto on the ascendant and or whatever. And I march to the beat of my own drum, being an Aquarian. So what I do, I write my own books, I get them printed myself, and then I distribute them myself. So that's the easiest way. I've written 3 books about the stone circles of Cumbria. One about Castlereagh, another one about the 3 stone circles in the Eden Valley near Penrith, which are the only ones in England that have spirals and circles on them, which is the name of the book. And I've written another one called Hidden Treasures, which is about other stone circles in Cumbria that are harder to find. So I've written those 3 books. I've also written another book, which we've also done an interview about, haven't we? Of my
runes,
my runes, the astrology of the runes. So if you're interested in any of them, then you just can contact me by my email address, which is all lowercase, Kevin Rowan 2. That's the number 2, Kevin Rowan 2 @hotmail.com. And I'm also on Facebook as Kevin Rowan Drewitt, which you can see from my name in the bottom left and all that. So you can also send me a friend request if you want, or message me through that. So and I just send them out mail order. I send them out. I don't make any money on my books. I purely pay for them to be printed, and I sell them for the cost of the printing, because I don't need the money, and I just want to spread the word.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was a great show. You spread lots of words about the planets tonight. So I'd like to thank you very much. Thank all you people for watching as well. And keep in touch with the planets and keep an eye on them and see how they affect you. So thanks again, Kevin, and we'll do this again soon.
Sure. I should probably plug my astrology club as well while I'm at it.
Quick,
which is it's called the Northern Lights Astrological Society, and there's a website. If you put Northern Lights Astrology into your Google, you'll come up to our website, and there's tons and tons of astrological stuff on there, including Icarus quarterly newsletter that has all my mundane predictions and articles, profiles of people, going right. Also stuff on history. There's stuff about Doctor Who. There's loads and loads and loads in there. So if you want to look at that, just go to Northern Lights Astrological Society on. I'm also on Northern Lights is also on Facebook as well. Put Northern Lights Astrology or Northern Lights Astrological, because if you just put Northern Lights, you'll get hundreds of companies that are called that of other things.
Bora Bora Lizzie's pictures probably, but it's good you've got some Time Lord in there.
Yeah, I mean there's Northern Lights lighting companies. There's Northern Lights this. There's Northern Lights that. If you put Northern Lights Astrology, you'll get to our website and you'll get to our Facebook page. So, and you're welcome to join us on there. We've got about 250 members, so it's lovely.
Excellent.
So thank you very much, Debbie, for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. It's always good to chat. So let me press the stop button. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.
Okay.